YouTube on the town's website. Maybe it'll go viral. We'll see. So yeah, since the last meeting, a few things that we were going to talk about at this meeting. One was the role of the liaison, sort of the resident members or the at-large members of this group, and what they might be the liaisons for as far as other boards and commissions and or other topics. The other thing was talking about the municipal capital improvement plan budget requests, how that works, what this committee's role might be with that, and just general report on any other significant implementation items. And so I'm sort of jumping ahead in the order here, but looking to item number 6, the discussion of liaison responsibilities for commission members. I'd sent out a list of municipal boards or departments that may need liaisons on this POCD implementation committee. In the list, it noted the members who are on this group who are members of other boards. Like, for example, Lynn's on the Board of Finance and WPCA. Dave is on EDC. But there's some boards that have tasks listed in the POCD, but don't have specific liaisons. Those are Department of Human Services, Police Commission, the Facilities Committee, Recreation Commission, and some other ones. Now, a lot of those might just have one little task in the plan and not a whole lot of responsibility, but that was the result of that list. So that's one option, is for the five resident members that we've always called it, to sort of break it up in that way, and be a liaison to these different boards and commissions. The other possibility is just to do it based on general topics in the POCD, which in a sense is how this board did it in the past. You know, things like agriculture or open space housing tended to be how it was broken up in the past. So I don't know if people have any general thoughts about that, or Danielle, if you thought one way would work better than the other.
Keith, this is Susan. If you just go by area, how do you ensure there's not an overlap by two resident members thinking that they're both responsible for something?
Well, there's always a chance for overlap, and that's sort of the way the POCD is, where, you know, natural resources will run into coastal resources because they're very similar issues. Yeah, there's always the risk of that, where if you do it by individual committees, at least, like you said, there'll be more of a clear delineation of, you know, who's dealing with the historical society, for example.
Right. Well, I'm just one person, but I would think that would be a lot more clear in terms of who's going to do what, because that way when we look at the POCD, we know just exact what task we're contacting them on and why we're contacting them.
Right.
And I guess just a second comment is, you gave us a list of about 12 items. I didn't actually count them. So I guess since there are basically 5 of us to split these up, if you or Danielle could point out which are the ones that you think really take priority. Like you said, some of them are just a token task. Maybe we should ensure that the, I know you were very kind to say, what are we interested in? But which of these agencies or groups are we really most interested in getting a liaison with? and we could split them up to make sure
Yeah.
that the big ones are taken, and then the little ones, whatever.
Yeah, I think looking at them, I would think that some of the more important ones are the police commission, because as the local traffic authority, they're basically in charge of what happens in the public right of ways. So any changes to street layouts, anything like that, would need their approval. Not to mention all the general public safety aspects they look at. So I think they'd be one of the most important ones. The Stonington Facilities Committee is another important one, and in the plan uses their older, unwieldy title of the Permanent Committee to Study the Needs and Uses of Town Public Buildings. So thankfully, they've been renamed the Stonington Facilities Committee, and they look at all the public buildings and property in town and try to plan for their use. So they've recently started getting together again after years of not meeting. Human Services might not have a lot of tasks in the plan, but they're an important department for the town. And the Recreation Commission is sort of a subset of them. They're a division of the Department of Human Services, or they work with them anyway. The historical societies are probably an important one too, just because historical preservation is an important part of the POCD and what we do in this town. And even though they don't have a direct regulatory role, I think they're still important here. The Agricultural Committee, it's an important topic. There's not a public agricultural committee. There's not a town board. There's just a group of private farmers that gets together occasionally at one of their residences. So with that, it might just be trying to, communicate with some of the farmers in town and see how that committee's doing. Danielle, do you know if the Stormwater Task Force is even meeting nowadays?
They're not right now, but that's something we're going to follow up with poor Chris, the new town engineer, to see if we can get that back up and meeting. They were pretty active when Scott was here. So hopefully we'll get them back up and running.
Two of the ones that I guess aren't that important to be a liaison to are the ones that our department already staffs, which is the Inland Wetlands Commission and the Architectural Design Review Board, just because, we staff their meetings and we're sort of aware of what they're doing. And the Bicycle Task Force isn't really created. Is the goal of the plan to have this bicycle task force, but it really isn't exactly a bicycle task force. There are some interested members of the community who have gotten together occasionally to talk about this issue, but there's not a real bicycle task force yet. And we've always envisioned it that the bicycle task force, for it to have real meaning, would have to have involvement from the police commission or the police department.
Yeah, see those two as linked. I know previously we tried to get the bicycle task force up and running without much success. So it would be a nice one to get up and running in terms of not this year's budget, but next year's budget. I think if some meaningful work was done on that, we'd have a better chance of moving forward some of those priorities. And like he said, that one would almost make sense to be either the same person at the police commission or at least have some connection overlap because they'll have the ultimate say in that. But yeah, no, I think if anybody has, like we said, areas of interest or has any questions about some of the liaison roles, we could go through it now, or we could also touch base on it after the meeting and decide by the next one, whatever works better for you guys.
Well, it's Susan again. I noticed, Keith, you gave us 4 ones that you thought were most important, and there are 5 of us. Would you like to throw a 5th in the fray?
Yeah, let's see.
I think Steve, and Chris can jump in here. I mean, so so I think human services and rec are one together. Police commission is 2, and it could be with bike or separate, but at least connected. The facilities committee, the historical society, and then everyone could weigh in here, but I think the agricultural committee could use a person, because it's also about, it could be farms, but it could also be about open space preservation, which is linked with the Conservation Commission and some other areas, but they've been advocates for that in the past and could probably be useful. But the Stormwater Task Force could also be one, because it could give us the spur we need to get that back up and running.
Well, I'll jump in if you don't mind. This is Lindsay. I'm already on the board of the Mystic River Historical Society, so I certainly wouldn't mind doing any of the historic stuff. You said the historical societies. Did you mean Stonington and Mystic? Or
Yes.
Okay. So I could certainly, I know Stonington as well. And I would, argue that the Architectural Review Board probably falls sometime somewhere in there as well on occasion.
Yeah.
It sounds like you probably don't need someone to go, but if you did, I would be all about it.
Well, thank you.
Can I just ask, is there a way to turn this around and approach it from the other direction, which would be to say, be an exercise, but can we go through all the POCD tasks, Keith, and find the ones that have anything to do with any of those unrepresented boards and commissions, and then write to them and say, these tasks, which you might be interested in, are included in the POCD, and if any of them, if you need help from the EDC on any of them, Dave Hammond is the liaison, because I don't know what their heartbeat is. I'd be reaching out at, I'm trying to figure out how it would work efficiently, and I'm not looking for more meetings to go to or chasing people. So I'm just wondering if the onus is more on those boards and commissions, that they have the tasks that really they have a lead on, but they don't have representation on this committee, and they're ready to start working on that. Could they be the ones to drive, okay, we want to try to complete this task, but we need EDC, and I'm going to contact Dave Hammond. Just another approach.
I think, Dave, that could make sense. Keith, I don't know what you think or anyone listening, but I do think kind of giving people a bit more specific could be useful in terms of which are the tasks that are the top priority that they might not even know that they have this direct link to the POCD, and it gives you as a liaison maybe more meat to follow up with.
Yeah, I think that, that reminder could come in handy, and I can break out what the tasks are that these different groups are responsible for. Some of them, they might be just listed as partners, because the POCD will list a task saying something like build a bike trail, and it might list a task leader, and also partners that are groups that might help in that. So especially if they're the partners, they might not even remember that they're the partners in this, but maybe they can be reminded that, hey, if there's anything you can do to help work with these other groups to spur things along, let us know if there's anything we can do to help.
So what just happened, Keith? You're gonna do something and let us know, and we're gonna not continue this assignment of liaisons at this point?
Well, I think if I heard him right, Dave was saying that, we could break out what the tasks are, that these groups are responsible for, and, sort of remind them of what they're responsible for in the plan. But we might still be able to just break down, what people are interested in here as far as what groups they might want to work with.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there's all those commissions and boards, do they have actions in the POCD? Or, do they have, how direct sort of is the connection between those boards and then the POCD itself? Or is it, like you said, some of them are partners on actions? And
Right. I think some of them might just be partners. I don't have the full list in front of me what the tasks are, but I do have it broken out where I could look into that.
Yeah, just to give one example, John, so like for under promoting green buildings as an example, consider ways to encourage the creation of greener buildings. The leader is planning and zoning, but partners are Architectural Design Review Board, Department of Public Works, Department of Planning, and I think obviously you could even probably expand beyond what's in the POCD. So I think I think maybe that kind of hybrid that Keith just laid out could be good. If we could keep going through the list, and if people have certain areas of interest, we can sign them up, and then we'll follow up with an email, maybe with where we see clear tasks or kind of supporting tasks within the POCD, but also for you to read through the POCD, look at it, because there might be things, using maybe Lindsay's historical example, where they might not specifically be tasked with it, but you see a need as a person in town, and maybe you actually want to talk with the historical societies about maybe some sort of zoning change or an ordinance or something that you feel is needed and in line with the POCD, and we could bring that back to the group to talk about. But so I think if you guys in between the next meeting can also, in addition to what Keith sends out, look through the POCD, and you can also add to kind of what we're going to send out. So maybe
that sounds good. I'm just speaking for myself. I'm happy to, fit in wherever there's kind of like a priority to put something on the table, or maybe see, just having somebody to advocate or show up at some of the meetings and kind of remind some of the boards about the tasks. So it seems like it would be good if you just gave us some homework or gave us an assignment or something. And I know that would help for me.
Yeah, that would help for me. I see some high priority tasks with the Conservation Commission. And does your list say it's vacant now, or?
Yeah, the Conservation Commission is supposed to have a member permanently on this board, much like the EDC does, and they did in the past. So we expect that there will be a permanent member of the Conservation Commission on this board.
Okay, I get it.
So they should come back around, hopefully. But maybe looking at the ones that are vacant, does anyone have an interest in the Police Commission and or bike paths? It could be separate or together.
Sure, this is Don. Yeah, I'd be interested in the Police Commission or the Facilities Committee.
Thanks, Don. Does anyone else have an interest in police and or facilities?
Danielle, I mean, it's still contact police commission, review board most related to the EDC. Next year, but rather than me chasing those three and saying, do you need anything from the POCD? I'm their liaison, and if they, you know, in charge of our partners for, and so if you're working on any of these, you know, contact Dave Hammond. I mean, I'd be happy to, you know, reach out and introduce myself, of course. But so I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense to people, but
No, it does.
you know, you can put me down for those three. I think those are the most directly related. I'd be in a, you know, best be able to support.
The way you said that is perfect. I think it's some of the
beautification. Sorry, Danielle. Beautification committee I also interact with on a regular basis, and the agricultural committee, such as it is, because I stay connected to Ward, and I'd be happy to also be the liaison, you know, be liaisons of each other, however that works. But I think a lot has to be done to promote to these other groups that they have a civic duty. It's not just us chasing them. They have a civic duty to try to align their efforts with the POCD, and then to reach out to the member that's, you know, their liaison on the POCD implementation committee to help accomplish tasks and goals.
No, David, that's perfect. I think you said it better than I did. And I think that's exactly it. I think some of the commissions get busy with their own, you know, work and day-to-day stuff that comes up. So I think as the liaison, and again, we can help do this, but so it's not just Keith always tracking them down for updates and trying to do this in his non-spare time. If the implementation committee can help, exactly as you said, with reaching out to certain boards and commissions to remind them of the POCD where their leads or support, or using the beautification committee as an example, you know, they didn't even exist when the POCD happened, but there's clearly areas of this report that link with them. So I do think kind of being the liaison, reminding them of their kind of tasks and seeing if they might be able to commit or share. Are there certain tasks they're trying to take forward in 2021? Do they have any goals that we should be aware of? Because it's hard to keep track of what every single person's doing. And I think sometimes some of the POCD tasks might get lost in the daily grind. So I think that would be helpful. And thanks for willingness to do so many. So maybe let's see if maybe if we just call on everybody. So it sounds like, John, you're kind of open to different ones. Lindsay shared a few. So is Dawn. I don't know, Erica or Susan, are there any ones that you're particularly interested in?
Well, this is Susan. I would be interested in the human services. And the recreation committee coming along with that, that's perfectly fine with me.
Okay, great. Thank you. They're great team.
Hi, Danielle. I am, given my current role at the Land Trust, I'm open to anything specifically with, you know, conservation, open spaces, the agriculture, any of those. I know they may be a little bit lower on the priority list, but get me in there. I'm ready.
That's great. So, Dave, you have so much on your plate, and we can talk about it offline, but maybe you could connect Erica with Ward. Sure. And with Will, I always forget his name, Shellfish Will, who's been involved with that committee, and try and take some of that on. And I think also we can connect offline, but with the Conservation Commission, hopefully they'll send a permanent representative, but I think still reminding them and helping them with some of the tasks. And one of the other things we tried to share with them was also just like, if there's more support we can provide them, if there's certain work they need assistance with, we can do that too, to see these tasks through. So if a commission says, oh, we want to update our open space plan, but we need X, Y, Z, that's helpful to get some feedback on. So that's really good. John, do you think stormwater task force might be up your alley, or is that a stretch?
Yeah, no, I was going to suggest that might be something I could take the lead on. So that's a commission that used to meet previously, but hasn't in recent times.
Yep, and I can put you in touch with Deb Downey, one of our other Board of Selectmen members. She was actually on it, but then had to leave the commission, obviously, when she became a Board of Selectmen member. But she could update you, and then we can connect you with Chris, who doesn't even know this yet, but that we'll try and get that task force back up and going. But he's doing some awesome work already on MS4 and different stormwater work within the town, so I think it's a natural fit there.
That sounds good.
Danielle, it's Lynn. It's great to have all these liaison stuff, but aren't we going about this backwards? I mean, how is this thing actually going to get anything done? Don't we need to go through that plan of conservation and development and pick 3 topics that we're going to prioritize and then go about it the other way, which is to say which commissions are involved in this and how do we direct their attention and focus to these things? Because we're swimming here, and I mean, I've been on this thing, this is, I don't know what it is, my 3rd meeting or something like that, and it's just like it was the last time, where there's lots of talking and not lots of doing. Just saying.
No, it's totally fair. And I think that is where Keith was gonna try and help with the follow-up, to say within these areas that we don't have any liaisons or now do, within the POCD, where are the kind of priority areas? And I think last time we identified, I don't know, it was like 7 or 8 areas. So we'll try and do some more work to narrow down. But I guess it's a fair point to say also, like, we really need to look at a lot of the POCD maybe priorities that don't have a big budget constraint with it. And that way we can actually try and get some of these things done. I think realistically, we have to really look at both the budget side of things as well as the time and resources that they take. But that's why I think each task force or each liaison could help them, I think, identify is there one area, if you're looking at affordable housing or low impact development, that we could take forward in the next year. That could be nice for the commission itself to work on with our liaison maybe.
Yeah, but there's one thing right on the table right now, right? Which is the Al Harvey acquisition. Right? So,
Yep.
So in other words, there's like a whole bunch of things that has to happen for that money to be released to, make our contribution for the grants, for everything else. And it's, it's an important project. So shouldn't sort of our collective focus be on that right now? Because it's something we can do and get done. And, it's a high priority. Not that specific parcel, but conservation, generally and whatnot. I mean, isn't that an easier way to go about this? Because a list of 7 things is huge, and we won't get them done. I know we won't, because I know exactly where the impediment and the bottleneck is going to be, and you do too. I just want to make this like an efficient use of my time and everyone else's, and actually achieve something this time, because every other plan of conservation and development commission or implementation commission has never gotten anything done. And it's because it's such an overwhelming task, right? It really has to be narrow, because multiple boards are involved with much of these things. So, it's not just one liaison anyway. It's more like the project requires certain liaisons. I don't know. It just seems to me it should be turned upside down, and it should be project driven and not the other way around. But that's just me. I've sat through a lot of these things, and we're still talking about the same stuff.
Yeah, and that's sort of like, in a way, the 2 hats that this commission wears, because half of it is just the sort of more passive aspect of just keeping track of what people are doing and keeping track of what's been getting done. And the other half is the more active side of trying to get stuff done. And that's what you're talking about here, is probably to, focus in on a few things that this committee can help with.
Well, yeah, because when you're on planning and zoning and whatnot, something comes up, that one of the parts of the checklist is the plan, does it conform to the plan of conservation and development, right? But most other commissions that are out there, whether it's Board of Finance, WPCA, the 2 that I know well, or other ones, there isn't even that process. So the plan of conservation and development for most of these commissions is sort of an afterthought, right? So that's like one thing that could change. Everybody, for any commission, where there's actionable items and whatnot, they probably ought to get a copy of what that is and understand that they're supposed to consider that before they make any decisions. But secondly, in order, they're going to do what they're going to do. We're not going to not build out a sewer line for any given reason if we have to, so we're not really consulting the plan of conservation and development. But, there's, if you want like bike paths and you want conservation and whatnot, those are proactive things. And they're going to involve multiple kind of committees and whatnot in order to make it happen, whether it's financing, police, or whatever. And so we should decide, we would do better deciding what, if we've got 7 things, what's the priority, and, how are we going to spearhead getting something done? That's what I would like to see, because I have done this for like a long time now, 20 years, and we're still talking about the same things.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think you kind of maybe even inadvertently broke it down into 2 things. So I think one is to what I think Keith and Dave to some extent were saying, we do want some people to reach out to these boards and commissions and kind of remind them about the POCD and that they have tasks within it, and to get them to give us feedback or updates on, are they looking at it? Are they working on it? Are they any that have already been accomplished and maybe we've missed it? Because as I said, this it's a 100+ page report. So I think the liaison thing is still needed to give us the updates as well as educate them, as some we don't necessarily reference the POCD like you mentioned, Lynn. But then I think it is a very fair point that if we could narrow down the list in terms of action. So if in 2021 there's 1 or 3 things that we really want to see done, and we already know some things are in the work that need more support, or some things need that kind of push to even get started so it can eventually be implemented. Maybe that's something we could serve to really focus on talking about as this group.
Yeah, because that would take more than the liaison. Right? It's going to take focus from all of us, and all the tentacles that go out to get stuff done. So, that's just my point of view, because some of these things that are in here are great and they should happen, but I'm not hearing how we can make them happen yet. So that's all. Sorry to
no, that's helpful. Maybe while we're giving you guys possible tasks to think about, sorry, I muted myself, I think 2003, I don't want to date myself, maybe I'll go back and look, but the last time that anybody was surveyed about the POCD, when it was first getting started, sorry, 2013, that makes more sense. So in March 2013, 700 residents eventually responded to the survey, and that's really how the whole POCD is based on, and it gives kind of percentages of where people want to see, what they want to see. But it's been almost 10 years, and we haven't really done any sort of survey or outreach in terms of, are these still people's priorities? Do they even know that these exist? If they had to further narrow them down, what would they be? Because as we kind of noted, it's kind of a laundry list of wish lists that we could never possibly fund all these things. So that was something else Keith and I talked about. Is it worth this group trying to come up with a follow-up survey to engage general residents as well as maybe commission members on the existing POCD, how we're doing, are our priorities still the same, and just to kind of educate maybe ourselves a bit at the start of the year. So we want to hear guys' feedback. You're volunteers and we only have so much time.
Do you still have a copy of the survey that was done last time?
Yeah, we must still have that.
Would it be possible to send that out to us as kind of homework to look at what was done last time? And was there a report or a compilation of the results? How did it, what happened to it after you got the results?
Results were summarized in the plan itself. Oh, all right. Yeah, the results were summarized in the plan itself. And it was a questionnaire that we just came up with ourselves, had residents fill out online. It wasn't like a professional survey or anything like that, but it did help guide the POCD subcommittee at the time with the meat of the actual plan. I can send that out to everyone just to see what that was like.
Do you think it worked? I mean, were you happy with the response? I know, I'm not sure, Keith, you were there in 2013.
Yeah. Yeah, we were happy with the response. You know, it 700 or so doesn't sound like a lot, but it is good for something like this to have that many people respond, and it did help guide the making of the plan.
Hey Keith, this is Lynn again. So I was on the original plan of conservation and development with Jason and planometrics and all of that. And you know, at that time there were all these community meetings and all this other stuff. And you know, the planometrics drafted the plan of conservation and development, which I will say now we spent $115,000 on at the time. And it was basically a boilerplate thing that checks off all these boxes and then was informed by the meetings that we had and resident input. So my understanding was we didn't repeat that process the second go around because for people who don't know, you have to do it. What is it, every 10 years? So
Right.
it's supposed to update it every 10 years. So basically the template for it was the original one prior to that Planometrics did, right? And then you guys sent out surveys. Is that pretty much what happened in 2013?
Right. You know, we didn't have the funding last time.
Right.
So the plan this last time was basically written by the POCD subcommittee members themselves.
Right.
They basically did a lot of the writing. People wrote individual chapters. And then Glenn from Planometrics, we had some limited funding for him to basically edit things together into one voice and provide some guidance. And he helped with some of the public meetings also.
Right.
So we used Planometrics in a much more limited way last time.
Right. But in the interval from the first one to that one, nothing happened. And then that one was 7 years ago. And, you know, and here we are. And it's basically the same list, right? Mystic parking is still a problem. You know, this is still a problem. We still want conservation. We're dealing with affordable housing. Some things have changed, like we now have a lot more affordable housing than we had at that time and so on. But basically, it's the same thing. So, you know, the implementation committee should be making more of these decisions. The whole purpose of having the committee is, to me anyway, is to make the decisions about what the priorities are and then go and act on them because the public gets a voice at that time. So rather than kind of go out and re-interview the public and, you know, see what's changed or what's different, I think this committee should decide what the top 3 things are and decide what to go after, in my opinion, because there's a lot of cooks in that kitchen. And when that happens, nothing gets done.
Yeah. And, you know, that's, you know, a year or two ago or so, using that sort of logic about trying to focus on implementing a certain thing, these agendas and these meetings started having this first selectman's implementation priorities when Rob was the first selectman. And so Rob came up with his list of, you know, 5 to 10 priorities. And so it was sort of a step in the direction that you're talking about here.
Yeah, but it was all an effort to accomplish the same thing because everyone on this call is busy, right? And so, you know, to have these meetings, we were having these, whatever they were, every 3 months or 4 months. That's not really an implementation committee. That's tea and cookies, right? So, Danielle, you have a list. You had a list the last time I was at a meeting. Shouldn't we be looking at that and making some decisions? And then deciding who's going to go out and do what in order to accomplish those things?
Yeah, I'd love anyone else's that wants to. Don't be shy. You can jump right in. Like we said, this is kind of a unique committee. So if you guys have thoughts, but I think some of the things Lynn is saying make sense and could be really exciting. So I think again, still having some liaisons just to remind these commissions that they have things in the POCD, be sure that they're aligning with them, that they're reminded to kind of what people in town wanted. But then also if we narrow down something like we talked about, like sea level rise, kind of updating zoning regulations, just as say 2 examples or 3 in affordable housing. These are 3 things that we're actively working on kind of as a team within Stonington town government. Don't have enough time though to see everything through. And so if we could harness the implementation committee, working with the other boards and commissions, and maybe I don't think I had gotten down to the very, very specific tasks. We looked at kind of the policy angle, but very specific tasks within those segments, and really try and think what could we do in 2021, considering obviously budget constraints and time constraints. What could we actually try and accomplish? I mean, that's a nice angle if people are interested or up for it.
Yeah, for example, rewriting the zoning regulations, right? That's going to require money. In order to get money out of the Board of Finance, then there has to be a pitch that gets made and there has to be support, right? So when an entire commission like the Plan of Conservation and Development says it's a priority and people in town want it, then, that's how we get it done, because then we can, then you have some basis, or the Board of Finance has some basis on which to decide to grant the money for it, if we can find it or not, or whatever. Or if it's the preservation of the Al Harvey land and whatnot, there has to be a decision as to whether or not that money that's been escrowed from all the planning and zoning decisions gets used to purchase it and whatnot. These are like very definable, specific things. And among other things, it puts the Plan of Conservation and Development Implementation Committee is not one that's well known to other commissions because it does this, right? It's not really out there, and it's not really asking for anything. And consequently, it's not getting a whole lot of love from anybody. But if the full force of this commission were to come to the Board of Finance and make its case, for the planning and zoning stuff, it's in conjunction with Keith and it's in conjunction with that department and it's in conjunction with you, but it has a lot more gravitas and a lot more odds of getting done. That's kind of really all I mean, because most of this stuff is going to, in the end, involve money, right? So.
No, that's really actually a perfect angle, maybe. And I swear I didn't talk to Lynn before this meeting, and not to put Ben and Keith on the spot, but using the planning and zoning kind of comprehensive update as an example. So this is something that's in the SIP again this year. We've never had success in securing the funding, and it's something that we're going to push really hard for, to advocate for with the Board of Finance. And I think, as Lynn mentioned, if it has any chance of getting passed, we need not just more support for it, but also I think more identification of what it can accomplish and what it can do. And the zoning update is interesting because it touches on all these different areas. It can touch on dealing with sea level rise. It can touch on economic revitalization. It can touch on affordable housing, on historic buildings and structures. So they're open space. It can touch on all these different areas. So that one might be, if we wanted to take this approach of really focusing on one actionable implementation for the year that could touch on a lot of things, we could at the next meet give you guys some homework, and at the next meeting do a deeper dive on this kind of planning and zoning regulation update approach as just one example of one kind of, if we wanted one really actionable item that we were looking at. And that one's interesting because it touches on so many different things.
So I'm hearing two specific tasks here. I'm hearing that we need to figure out what boards and commissions are involved with each of the items that we would like to accomplish. And I'm, hearing that we need to narrow it down. But I like the idea of having maybe three. One is great, and I think we can have a top priority, but not every board and commission may be involved with that. And so it would be nice if we could also go to the boards and commissions that maybe, don't have anything to do with the zoning stuff, and be able to say, this is your list of things in the POCD that you're supposed to be involved with and thinking about, and this is our top priority of those things.
Maybe even a top 5 as a first step, not to, I know the idea is to narrow it down, but it would be interesting to hear, okay, these are, from Danielle and Keith, your perspectives, just these are the top 5 tasks in the POCD that we would like to move forward. And then maybe this commission could kind of discuss which ones are actionable, or, which ones are more realistic, and have a discussion about that. It's one idea.
Yeah, there'll have to be some narrowing down. So refresh my memory, I guess, Lynn, when the Board of Finance public hearings are this year?
We haven't set that schedule yet.
Okay.
It's probably coming up in our next meeting.
Yeah, Lynn, I think we booked some of the meeting. I think it starts the middle of February and it'll go through March.
Yeah, but well, Keith is talking about the public hearing for the actual budget, right? Are you talking about that, or are you talking about when people make their presentations before we set the budget?
Well, I'm talking about the public hearings where this committee might have a chance to provide input to the Board of Finance.
Oh, okay, so that's not so much. Yeah, it's not really a public hearing. It's public meetings where basically departments make their presentations, and then outside agencies and whatnot. That would be the right place.
Yeah, we can share
Okay.
that those meeting schedules with everyone. Yeah, I think I forget the exact date, but it starts kind of mid-February and then it'll go pretty actively through March. So that's one thing. I like the idea of, I see I have the A through H. I think we could definitely further narrow this down, and then maybe have, like you said, if it's 5, John, just since there's 5 resident members, maybe everybody kind of tries to take a lead on it and think of maybe even just like one actionable item within that. Because it is interesting. A lot of things actually do go back to zoning regulations, and if not, they definitely go back to budget. So there's kind of 2 themes where we probably need to see some action done by either of these 2 boards in order to get any traction. But I don't know, I wanted to see if anyone else, Erica or Susan or Don or anybody else wanted to come in.
I like the idea of narrowing it down. I do think the 8 that are presented under item 4 on the agenda, I think that does spread us too thin, given everything going on. One related question I have, I think it's related, is I noticed in the SIP that Keith sent out, there was a line item for POCD for $30K. What is that intention? What is that earmarked for?
The idea of that was just to set aside some money each year for the creation of the next POCD, which is due in 2025.
Okay. Okay, so it's not for consultants to throw consultants for any of the top priority or anything that we would use. You're saving that money, basically.
Right. It is to sort of store it away.
Okay.
And yeah, one of the things on the agenda was going to be the discussion of the capital improvement and budget request, just because, like Lynn was saying, it is how things get implemented, is with funding to implement them. Mm-hmm. So I think, increasingly, one of the roles of this committee could be to help advocate for funding that helps get this stuff done. Which is why I was asking about the timing of all this, just to see if this committee could take more of a role in that this year for some of the things that that would help implement these tasks, like the zoning regulation rewrite.
And just to share, so for example, this Wednesday at 9 a.m. for I think that's the time it starts. We have our annual Board of Selectmen SIP meeting where we'll be further prioritizing and probably starting to make some cuts. None of it will be permanent. It'll be kind of suggestions sent to the Board of Finance, but and this is just the town side, not the school side, but just to give you guys a sense. And these numbers are general, but say I think we have a little over $4 million worth of requests in there. By the time it gets to the Board of Finance and they're done, they're likely going to have to narrow that down to 1 or 2 million. So there's millions of dollars of requests that are, in my opinion, almost all really worthwhile, but they're going to have to come out, get put off. And that's where I think the prioritization in this committee could really help. So if we can say for 2022, we're really wanting to focus on these, top issues, and this is why we need this budget for it, or to lay the groundwork for something else in future years. It can be really helpful because I think it is hard and it's overwhelming, and there's people kind of advocating for their one piece of the pie where they don't see the whole pie. And if this committee can kind of help see the whole pie and help both residents and other boards and commissions and everyone who's advocating for their piece kind of understand the big picture, I think it could be helpful.
Remember that this the way of doing this works well if you think about the libraries. Right? For years, the libraries were kind of battling each other for limited funds, you know, the three libraries, who was going to get how much and whatnot. And so Danielle had the brilliant idea of having a subcommittee that was the library people and a couple members of Board of Finance and whatnot. And then what happened was, once the cases were made and so on, the Board of Finance could advocate with the few members of the Board of Finance who were on it could advocate with the bigger board, and we got it done. So that is kind of the only way to do this, to me, for anything that's going to require funding anyway.
And just knowing that a couple of you, I think, or a lot of you, maybe, are on the climate change task force, you know, that or have that background, that's definitely an area I think we need a lot of help with, both in terms of education, outreach on kind of all sides, and prioritization. You know, where can we have the biggest impact? Is it with a specific project? Is it a certain study? Is it something more to do with zoning? I think it's such a big topic, and to think about what we can do with our budget in Stonington, you know, that's an area. I mean, it's in the POCD. It's such a big, important topic. Are there things that we could be advocating, educating, and kind of coming together on? Because I think every year it kind of doesn't get very far within the budget because we don't have that work already done and laid out. So that's definitely one area. Like we said, the zoning update is a huge one. And then I don't know, I'd like to know, Dave, or anyone's really feedback, but something on whether it's about, you know, supporting existing local businesses, trying to help them grow that are here, attracting other employers to town. That's kind of always a big POCD area. But I don't know what you guys think, if that's kind of a good fit for this group or not.
Well, personally, I really like supporting the zoning regulations. I am one of those people who are on the climate change task force, and we wring our hands all the time over the state of the zoning regs. And I think, to your point, it's a linchpin of a lot of other things that are going on around town. So I would advocate or support that become the number one priority.
This is Ben from Planning and Zoning. Remind me, Keith and Danielle, we are pushing for the regulations to be rewritten over a 2-year period. And we are going to really try to push for financing this year, correct? And so therefore, if the POCD would like to go to one of these Board of Finance committee meetings and state the case, that would be great.
And I think also, not to give you guys too much work, but I think one of the things we've talked about with Keith and the team is these zoning regulation updates can be like huge budget items, or they can be a little bit smaller. And some of it is how much work the municipality can take on themselves. And as we've seen year after year, our planning department is amazing, but they just have too much to do. They can't take all this on themselves. So I think if there were aspects like, you know, within this group to go back to, say, the climate change task force and say, let's look at the zoning regulations and what would be our recommendations, or let's look at open space or historic issues or whatever it is that we want to kind of tackle within some of the zoning updates, in addition to just, you know, organization and clarity that we want to provide for people. That could be something that could be helpful, in addition to advocating for the budget, but to actually look back at the POCD and help kind of see where things maybe aren't as aligned as they should be. So Ben, do you think that's too heavy of a lift for people? You're more familiar and Keith with the zoning regs as they stand.
For people on the commission to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I think that's asking a lot. I was hoping that the outside consultant would do the heavy lifting, and then, as you say, maybe for sustainability or very localized agendas, we could go to the subcommittees within the town of Stonington.
Yeah, so planning and zoning, or Keith, you have to figure out what it costs to go out and hire a consultant, right? Because then you put that into the SIP. But then the case has to be made to Board of Finance as to why it's relevant, because like I'm sure that I'm the only member on there who sat on P&Z too, right? So most people don't understand how stuff is woven together, not even on Board of Finance so much. So EDC plays a role in that because zoning regulations that are conducive to development bring developers, right? And sewer plays a role in that, utilities plays a role in that, conservation plays a role, everything does. And so it's the case has to be made by somebody. I mean, obviously Keith makes a case when he's up there, but he's alone and he's doing it from, just the planning and zoning perspective. But that's where the plan of Conservation and Development Implementation Committee can be handy because it's broad based, right? It's the big picture. And that's basically how stuff gets funded.
I think there is a price for, you have a quote already, don't you, Keith? Some sort of estimate?
Yeah, I remember something last year.
Yeah. And we're working on a better, we're working on more of an estimate too. But I mean, what's great about this committee is it represents people from all the different committees in town and just people throughout the town. And I mean, the zoning regulations do affect so many things, whether it's economic development, historic preservation, open space. So no matter what your interest is, you have a vested interest in having better zoning regulations. I think that's one of the big pitches here. And, whether it's the Board of Finance, Planning and Zoning, or any other boards, I mean, sometimes having a lot of members of the community speak in support of something does make a difference. So I think that's an important thing to remember too, is that, when there are all those competing interests out there, it does make a difference to have people out there saying, this is important to me.
And so maybe I'm just conscious of everybody's time. I believe February 23rd is going to be when we, general government, and our SIP gets presented to the Board of Finance. So maybe just thinking about if we want to have one actionable item from this meeting, and we can kind of maybe pick up over email some of the other items that we threw out there. But since this one has a deadline, if you will, of February 23rd, that's kind of fast approaching. Would it make sense to have people consider, maybe Keith shares our write-up for that zoning reg update, and have people think about it with their different kind of hats on, whether it's the sea level rise or economic development or just general kind of greening or low impact development, different things that maybe to think about which boards and commissions they might be able to reach out to and potentially get, and Lynn, tell us if you think this is a waste of time or not, but either a letter of support or a commitment from someone from one of those boards and commissions to come and talk to why it would matter to their commission that this gets done, just since that is one thing that has a kind of a tighter timeline, and maybe we could pick up on some of these other top areas of focus later at a future meeting, but I don't want to cut anybody short.
Well, definitely what the public has to say. The committees represent sort of niche members of the public in a way, right? So the more of them that are standing up for this and the more people that stand up for it, the more likely something is to get done. Because the Board of Finance isn't all seeing and all knowing. We're just up there to deploy everyone's tax dollars the way they want them deployed, without, letting the town go bankrupt, right? That's what we do. So, so the more people who are involved, the more likely something is to happen, for sure.
So it sounds like what we need to do from the different areas of interest is recruit people, either volunteer ourselves and or recruit other people who feel the same way we do to show up for that February 23rd meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, to be clear, that's just for kind of the general government side. We'll send out the whole Board of Finance schedule because, like we said, there'll be other areas. There'll be one focused on human services and outside agencies. So again, if say you're kind of a liaison there, you might ask them what they might need, and maybe there's others, and like you said, in the community or other task force or commission that could speak to that. So I think the budget process might be a good area for us to focus in the near term. Again, there'll be different, and then like Lynn said, it's not until then, probably usually end of March or even early April, when the actual public hearing, when the real sausage gets made publicly, and you can see the debate that happens. So I mean, the February meeting will be important, but then it'll be important to kind of stay engaged, and then probably by that end of March, early April, really be sure we have our final arguments fine-tuned, because that's when things will really be getting cuts. Not usually
So-
added cuts.
It's more of a almost procedural question, I guess. But so the meeting at the 23rd, that's sort of the SIP presentation where the departments go up and say, explain their request to the Board of Finance. Is there an opportunity for representatives of different boards and commissions to sort of stand up and say, I support this? Or is there not that opportunity because it's not the actual public hearing?
Lily, go ahead.
What I would say about that is, you know, what you want to do when you make the SIP presentation is you want to be able to explain to the Board of Finance succinctly why time is right to be spending this money, you know, and why it's needed. Okay, so at that point, you'd want to have a position statement from the EDC. You'd want to have something from conservation, potentially. You'd want to have something from climate change. You know, so the more people that contribute to it and the more representation there is, the more seriously it gets looked at, and, you know, and the more likely the prospect that some or all of the funding will be granted.
Okay. So you're thinking
that's the place.
more written statements than one at a time, people walking up to the microphone.
No, that's not a great thing. That we don't love that. And there's no microphone to walk up to. It's going to be one of these Zoom meetings, right? So the more that, you know, yeah. So the best sort of presenter of this will be somebody who can present the various aspects. You got to understand that most people who sit there, they don't understand how zoning permeates every last thing in this town in every conceivable way. Right. So we need to show them that, and we show them that with all the various other boards and commissions and how it pertains to them having a zoning rewrite or what they might need in it or something along those lines, because that's how it gets a priority.
Mm-hmm.
Starting with what the Board of Selectmen assign as a priority. But Danielle will tell you from having sat in both seats that we regularly change that because we got a pizza, right? And all we do with that pizza is change the size of the slices. Right? We can only make the pizza so much bigger in a given year. So what you're doing is you're vying for prioritization over other things. And believe me, it's a long, long, long list of other things. And so you get attention by making the most coherent and, you know, biggest bang for the buck argument you can. And zoning really is that. But most people, I can tell you, do not understand that.
Right. It's not the most exciting topic for a lot of people.
May not be the most exciting, but it really does dictate, because what it does is it foots to the other side of the budget. It foots to the grand list. Okay. And that's what you have to make people understand, is that rewritten zoning regulations that take into account all the various things that, you know, have occurred since the last time they were written, has an impact on the grand list. And the presumption is it's a positive impact. Now, if you come to the Board of Finance and you say, well, we're going to have all these, you know, you don't want to come and say, well, conservation is going to start to say that we can't build over here and we can't do this and we can't do that. And, you know, gets a little less attention.
Who would be the lead presenter for, who would be the lead presenter or department for updating zoning regs? Is that planning?
It would be, it would be Keith.
Keith?
Yeah.
Right.
But if Keith, it would be Keith, but if Keith were there, you know, because if in the form of this commission, we wove the story together with all the other commissions, then you're making a compelling argument.
Right. So it's not just something that the town planner wants to make his life easy. It has a real impact on the town in a lot of different ways.
Exact impact on the grand list, right? Exactly. Yeah. Right. And livability in the town. I mean, that matters too, but the Board of Finance is a numbers game. And this, if I remember from last year, this was a pretty expensive endeavor here to go ahead and rewrite the zoning regs, right? Yep. It was like hundreds of thousands of dollars, if I recall correctly, right?
Yeah, depending on the scope of it. But I mean, a lot of other towns have spent that much.
And we're hoping to do that over 2 years, correct?
Right.
So 2 slugs of 150 or whatever it would be.
Right. Mm-hmm. But that's a large chunk of the SIP. So in order to
Yep.
get that, you have to be convincing about why it matters. And the most convincing thing you can say about it is that it's accretive to the grand list. Because in my opinion, it will be.
Right.
Maybe circling back to where we actually started in some ways, and we can send emails out so you guys don't have to remember everything. But maybe it would be that if we're focusing on this one kind of SIP zoning issue, because it touches on so many other things right now, thinking about the sort of liaison role that you had either volunteered or we sort of assigned you, maybe to reach out to those groups to say, and again, we can help write it, but this is something we're advocating for as the POCD implementation committee. We'd love your feedback as ex-commission as to how this would positively impact the work you're trying to do and how it links back to the POCD. And like Lynn said, it will help Keith leave a stronger kind of position statement, and to be able to say, if we had 6 boards that all set into this and helped advocate for it, through their own words that Keith will then jointly present. I think that could be really helpful, and we might actually stand a chance maybe of getting it. This has asked for many years without any success, so I think this would be something the POCD implementation committee could point to a success factor. And like we said, it touches on things. It touches on open space, climate and sea level rise, historic. It can touch on all these things. Obviously, EDC. It can even touch on MS4, because that's actually something the planning committee's already been working on. So the stormwater is already kind of in there. But I don't know, Keith, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to try to get the support from these groups. I mean, we're hearing it from a member of the Board of Finances that this is the strategy we should be taking here.
Well, bear in mind, I'm one person, okay?
Right.
But but it's very difficult. What people don't understand, unless you're sitting in that chair, is how many people come before us with a handout, meaning we need funding for this, and they have basically, they spend 30 seconds telling us why, right? And funds are limited. They just are. That's just the nature of things. And so, again, it comes down to the most compelling argument you can make, the better, and the more you can demonstrate that it's an investment and not so much an expense, the better, right? So, but I'm one person. If you persuade me, then I try to persuade them.
Right.
So Keith, would it make sense, because I'm conscious we're taking a lot of everybody's time, maybe Keith and I will sit together, and then we'll send you guys out an email with some kind of potential wording and thoughts, and then we won't want to have a group conversation and violate any FOI requirements, but we can do some one-on-one conversations with members to see kind of what area you might be able to bite off or focus on, with the goal of getting something together by mid-February so we can get it over to the Board of Finance. And like we said, hopefully this is a good one because it touches on all these other areas, and then we can broaden out a bit. And I think this is actually the very first Board of Finance meeting for the budget that will happen. So we'll still have time, like we said, to look at other areas that we might want to advocate or look at.
Yeah, Danielle, I only want to say one other thing, which is this. This to me, this committee could be very powerful if it wants to go down that path, because it's the only thing in town that weaves all the little aspects together, right? So it could be, I mean, it really, if it's done right, it could be the kind of thing that gets consulted for a lot of different things. So that's what I'm trying to move it to, because like, as I said, I've been at this a long time. So, I think it can do more, and we can drive things, in other words, the plan of conservation and development shouldn't just be one of these state statutes that has to occur every 10 years and whatnot. And we spend a lot of money and spin a lot of wheels and waste a lot of time. And the town looks exactly the same as it did 20 years ago, in terms of whatever, people decided they wanted or didn't want. Doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, when the 2015 POCD was put together, that was sort of the idea that this committee would be a bit of a super committee, with the chairs of all the different commissions out there. And yeah, that's part of the idea behind it, is to sort of get some of this stuff done and have all the people in one room going in the same direction.
No, that's helpful. And then maybe at a future meeting, like we said, we'll stock down our conservation commission member to be sure that they join. And we could also even see, I'm sure a member of the police commission wouldn't mind sending a representative. That way they're directly here in addition to any liaison role. Yeah, having that everyone in the same room can be very helpful, even if it's virtual. So for homework assignments for us, we'll send everybody kind of a group email and then do some one-on-one follow-up. Is there anything else on our side or your guys' side? I know this was probably a bit of a brainstorm, kind of a little bit of a mess, but I think we actually hopefully narrowed in on something pretty powerful to do with the committee in the short term and the long term. So yeah, don't hesitate to call or follow up with Keith or I with any kind of, you sit with this for a while or you read the POCD again in your before bed and get any ideas or thoughts of other directions. Like I said, we're really open to feedback. There's a lot of potential that hasn't been tapped yet, I think, with past implementation committees, and we have a good start with trying something new this time.
Yeah, I agree. I would point out to people 25 years for sidewalks in Pawcatuck. Okay, that project looks like it's coming to fruition. The libraries required a special subcommittee, and creating a data-driven argument as to why they deserve more funding, and they got it. So those are two things that I can point to that are very specific. So if the town decides it wants bike paths, that would require funding and approvals and all kinds of things. That doesn't just happen magically, and it's not because it's in the POCD. It has to be made to happen, and that's the job of this committee. And I'm sorry I talked so much. Sorry.
It was helpful. Anybody else want to share anything before we close out? And then maybe at our next meeting, we'll do a double round of draft minute approvals and we'll follow the agenda a bit more.
Sounds good.
Thank you guys for bearing with us.
All right, that was good.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Steve.
Hi, Lindsay.
Thank you. Thank you
I haven't talked to you in a long time.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.